In the dead silence of night, the stillness of the Iroquois forest is suddenly broken by the faint beat of a distant drum. The birds scatter, the shadows of the trees grow longer, and the darkness itself feels alive, watching, waiting. Legends whisper that the sound does not come from mortal hands, but from a king betrayed and murdered centuries ago. A king who never truly died, who returned as the ghost king of the Iroquois forest, guarding his land in eternal shadow. The forest of the Iroquois stretched endlessly across the land, a living sea of trees that whispered to those who walked beneath them. Each trunk was tall and ancient, its roots buried deep in the soil that carried the blood and stories of countless generations. Rivers wound like silver serpents through the hills, their waters glistening under the glow of the setting sun. The air was heavy with the perfume of pine and cedar, and the calls of birds echoed through the valleys like the voices of spirits unseen. As the sun lowered, the sky burned with molten gold and crimson. A thin mist began to rise, curling around the branches, softening the edges of the world, making the forest appear like a dream or a vision. To the Iroquois, this was not simply nature, it was a sacred temple. Every stone, every river, every tree carried the breath of the ancestors. The elders taught that the spirits walked here, guiding the living, watching the foolish, punishing the greedy. It was a land alive with mystery, a land that breathed. In the heart of this vast wilderness lay a great village, its longhouses stretching along the riverbank. Smoke from cooking fires curled upward, carrying with it the smell of roasted deer and maize. Children laughed as they ran barefoot through the grass, their faces painted with bright colors from the berries their mothers crushed. Warriors sat sharpening their blades, their bodies strong from years of hunting and fighting. And above them all, like the towering pine that rises higher than the rest, stood their protector, King Onaka. But before his name became legend, before whispers of his ghost spread through the woods, he was a man of flesh and blood. Born during a thunderstorm, when the sky roared and the river overflowed, the elders had said he was touched by the spirits themselves. As a boy, he was fearless, climbing cliffs, wrestling wolves, walking alone into the darkest parts of the forest without fear. By the time he grew into manhood, his body was broad as a bear's, his eyes sharp as an eagle's. His voice carried like thunder, and when he raised it, even the proudest warrior listened. To the Iroquois, Onaka was more than a king, he was the bridge between the living and the spirits. They believed the forest spoke through him. When a storm approached, he could feel it in his chest before clouds appeared. When enemies marched, he dreamt of them before scouts returned with warnings. When children fell ill, he sat by their side, chanting prayers and painting symbols on their skin, calling the spirits to chase sickness away. To his people, he was not only protector of their lands but guardian of their souls. Onaka's power lay not in weapons alone but in the trust of his people. At night, when the fires burned low and shadows danced on the longhouse walls, he would sit among the elders. They told him stories of the first ancestors, of battles won by courage and faith, of spirits who walked among men when the world was still new. And he listened, not as a ruler above them but as a son listening to fathers. This humility, rare in leaders, made the people love him all the more. Yet the world beyond the forest was not silent. Rivals envied the strength of the Iroquois. Tribes watched with wary eyes as Onaka's people flourished, their hunts rich, their warriors strong, their children fearless. Among these rivals were the Mohawks, proud and cunning. Their chief saw in Onaka not a brother but a threat. Whispers of jealousy grew into plans of betrayal. And though the Iroquois lived in peace, the shadow of war stretched ever closer. But in those golden evenings, when the sun bled into the hills and mist covered the land like a sacred veil, the people still believed themselves safe. For they knew their king walked among them, eyes burning with wisdom, hands steady as stone. Children gathered around the fires, clinging to their mothers, as the elders told them, when the sun sets and the mist rises, know that Onaka walks. And as long as he walks, no darkness shall claim us. The peace of the Iroquois forest did not last forever. As the seasons turned and the rivers froze then melted again, whispers of danger reached the ears of King Onaka. Scouts returned with troubling news. Mohawk warriors had been seen near the borderlands, their fires glowing like hungry eyes in the night. At first, Onaka chose patience. He sent envoys with gifts of tobacco and words of friendship. For generations, the tribes had lived in uneasy balance, and he wished to avoid spilling blood upon the soil of his ancestors. But the Mohawks were not seeking peace. Their chief, driven by envy, feared Onaka's rising power. He saw how the Iroquois prospered, hunts full of deer, children strong and fearless, warriors bound in loyalty. To him, it was only a matter of time before Onaka's people grew too powerful. And so he sharpened his plans in secret. One autumn evening, as the red leaves fell like fire across the forest floor, betrayal crept into Onaka's village. A man named Tohanu, once a trusted warrior, slipped into the longhouse of the Mohawk chief. His heart was poisoned by jealousy of Onaka's strength, of the love his people gave him, of the respect his name carried. Tohanu promised the Mohawks that he could deliver the king into their hands. In return, he demanded riches, and something more, power of his own. Meanwhile, in the village, life went on. Children played near the river, their laughter mingling with the rush of water. Women pounded maize into flour, their songs carrying through the smoke of fires. Onaka himself prepared for the great festival of the harvest, a time when the tribe gave thanks to the spirits for the bounty of the land. It was a night of dance, of drums, of stories whispered into the dark. No one knew that as the fires were lit, danger crept closer, silent as a serpent. The festival began under a full moon that hung low and bright, casting silver upon the trees. Drums thundered, warriors danced, and the people painted their faces in red and white. Onaka stood tall at the center, his eagle feather headdress catching the moonlight, his eyes glowing like embers. He raised his hands to the sky and called out to the spirits, giving thanks for the rivers, the hills, the trees that fed them. His voice was deep, a voice that made even the flames seem to listen. But as the people danced and sang, a shadow moved through the forest. Mohawk warriors, led by Tohanu, crouched among the trees. Their bodies were painted black, their weapons sharp with stone and bone. They crept closer, the sound of drums hiding their approach. Their plan was simple: strike when the music was loudest, when the people's guard was down, when even Onaka himself was lost in ritual. And then, the moment came. As the drums reached their peak, as fire rose high into the night, a war cry split the air. Arrows flew like black rain, piercing the sky. Screams echoed through the village. Women clutched their children. Warriors grabbed spears and shields, but many fell before they could rise. The Mohawks surged forward, their blades glinting in the firelight. Onaka roared like thunder, his spear flashing in the moonlight. He struck down enemy after enemy, his voice carrying over the chaos: protect the children. Protect the forest. His people rallied around him, their courage burning, but the attack had come with such fury, such treachery, that the battle seemed hopeless. In the heart of the fight, Onaka saw him, Tohanu, the traitor. His former brother-in-arms stood with the Mohawks, his face twisted with pride. Rage filled Onaka's chest, and he charged, his spear raised. The two clashed with a cry, sparks flying as their weapons met. For a moment, the world seemed to stop. The forest, the fires, the screams all fading to silence as two destinies collided. But fate is cruel. A Mohawk arrow, fired from the shadows, struck Onaka in the chest. His body staggered, but he did not fall. He tore the arrow free and drove his spear through Tohanu's shoulder, a final act of vengeance. Blood poured, cries rang out, and the king's body finally gave way. He fell upon the sacred soil of his ancestors, the moonlight bathing him in silver as his people screamed his name. The Mohawks fled before dawn, leaving smoke and blood behind. The village was shattered, their king gone. Yet even as his body lay still, the forest did not forget. The mist thickened that night, curling around the longhouses like protective arms. The drums, broken and silent, began to echo faintly, though no hands touched them. And those who kept watch swore they saw a figure moving among the trees, tall, broad, with eyes glowing like fire. Onaka had fallen, but his spirit had not left. The village never truly recovered from that night. Fires were rebuilt, the wounded were tended, and the children slowly began to laugh again, but the shadow of loss lingered. Every corner of the longhouses, every step along the riverbank, whispered the name of the fallen king. Onaka's body had been buried in a sacred clearing, where the trees bent inward as if bowing to the spirits. His people wept, but even through their tears, they believed his soul still walked among them. For in the days that followed his death, strange things began to happen. The first was the sound of drums. One night, when the village lay in silence, the steady beat of a single drum echoed through the mist. Warriors rushed to the fire circle, expecting to find a hand upon the skin. But the drum lay empty, its surface glowing faintly in the moonlight, vibrating as though touched by invisible fingers. The sound carried deep into the forest, filling the hearts of the people with both dread and awe. The second was the mist itself. It had always risen in the evenings, soft and gentle, but now it grew thick and heavy, curling around the village like smoke from unseen fires. Hunters returning from the forest swore they heard footsteps in the fog, heavy, measured, the steps of a warrior. Some claimed they saw a tall figure with glowing eyes, moving among the trees, watching but never attacking. One hunter dropped his bow in terror when he saw the outline of Onaka himself, spear in hand, his chest still marked by the arrow that had killed him. At first, the elders tried to calm the people. "It is the spirit of protection," they said. "Onaka has not abandoned us, he watches, he guards." But the fear did not fade. Children woke screaming in the night, saying they had seen the king standing over their beds. Mothers swore they heard whispers in the dark, voices that did not belong to the living. Even the bravest warriors admitted that their dreams were haunted by Onaka's fiery eyes, staring through the mist. One evening, a group of young men, eager to prove their courage, decided to test the legend. They went into the forest carrying torches, laughing loudly to hide their fear. They reached the clearing where Onaka was buried and mocked the silence. "If you are here, Ghost King," one shouted, "show yourself." The others joined in, their voices breaking the sacred stillness. The forest answered. The torches flickered, then went out, leaving only the pale glow of the moon. Mist poured across the ground like water, and out of it rose a figure, tall, broad, its eyes burning like coals. The young men froze, their courage shattering. One dropped to his knees, begging forgiveness. Another turned and ran, his scream echoing through the night. Only one remained standing, unable to move as the ghostly king lifted a spectral spear. The air grew heavy, the earth itself seemed to tremble. But then, as suddenly as it had come, the vision vanished. The mist thinned, the forest fell silent, and the torches rekindled on their own. When the young men returned to the village, their faces pale and their voices shaking, they swore that Onaka had returned, not as protector, but as something darker. From that night on, no one dared enter the clearing again. The stories spread quickly, weaving themselves into every corner of Iroquois life. Children were warned never to wander into the forest alone. Warriors prayed twice before battle, calling on the Ghost King to either grant them strength or spare their souls. And when the mist grew too thick, people shut their doors, whispering that Onaka was walking again. Yet not all feared him. Some believed the king's spirit sought justice, not revenge. They said he lingered because betrayal had cut his life short, and until the blood of traitors was answered, his soul could not rest. Tohanu, the betrayer, had fled with the Mohawks, his shoulder forever scarred by Onaka's final strike. Rumors spread that Onaka's spirit hunted him, following his every step, waiting for the moment to finish what had begun. And so, the legend deepened. Onaka was no longer just a memory. He was a shadow in the mist, a heartbeat in the drums, a burning gaze in the night. To his people, he was both protector and curse, an eternal reminder that even kings do not die quietly. Years passed, yet the shadow of King Onaka never left the Iroquois forest. The village rebuilt itself, children grew into warriors, and life continued, but the whispers never stopped. Travelers and hunters told of a tall figure moving through the mist, eyes glowing like embers, spear in hand, guarding the trees and rivers that had once fed the people. The story of Onaka transformed into legend, spreading beyond the Iroquois lands to other tribes, who whispered his name in fear and awe, the ghost king of the Iroquois forest. The Mohawks, too, felt the presence of Onaka, though they dared not speak it aloud. Tohanu, the betrayer, was never truly safe. Wherever he fled, he sensed the gaze of the spectral king following him, waiting. He saw glimpses of glowing eyes in the mist, heard the echo of drums in the stillness of night. Sleep eluded him, for dreams of Onaka haunted him endlessly. The betrayal that had seemed so clever now became his eternal curse. Back in the village, the Iroquois learned to live with the ghost king. They understood that Onaka's spirit was neither cruel nor vengeful toward his people. He had become their eternal guardian, protecting the forest and its inhabitants from those who meant harm. Hunters noticed that the deer and game always stayed within the safety of the forest, wolves and birds guiding the lost back to paths they would otherwise never find. Crops seemed to grow richer, the rivers ran clearer, and those who honored the forest and their ancestors felt Onaka's presence watching over them. Yet the legend was not just about protection, it was about the price of betrayal and the weight of honor. No Mohawk dared approach the forest openly after that fateful night, and the tribe grew wary of deceit in their own ranks. Stories of the Ghost King were told in every household, not merely as tales of fear but as lessons. Parents taught their children that courage, loyalty, and respect were the truest forms of power. Warriors trained, not just for battle, but for justice, knowing that Onaka's spirit could see even through lies. One evening, as the sun set in a blood-red sky, an old warrior spoke to the gathered village. He recounted the night Onaka fell, the eclipse that had shrouded the forest, and the first drumbeats that echoed through the mist. He described the glowing eyes, the spectral spear, and the final strike against the betrayer. The children listened, wide-eyed, imagining the flames of the festival, the shadowed trees, and the king who refused to die. And then, as the elder finished his story, a soft mist rolled into the clearing. From within it came the faint glow of a figure, tall, broad, and unmistakable. The people froze. They had seen him countless times in dreams, in whispers, in the rustling of leaves, but never so clearly. The Ghost King stood among the trees, his chest marked by the wound that had ended his life, his eyes glowing like molten fire. He did not move forward. He did not speak. But the presence was enough. A chill, a calm, and a reassurance all at once. The forest seemed to inhale, the leaves rustling as if in approval. The villagers bowed their heads. The legend was alive, and it would remain so for eternity. Onaka had become more than king, more than protector. He had become spirit, guardian, and teacher, reminding all who entered the forest that the line between life and death was thin, and that honor, courage, and loyalty were the true legacy of a king. Generations came and went. Stories evolved. The drumbeats in the mist became a symbol, guiding those who respected the land, warning those who sought to harm it. Travelers from distant tribes told tales of glowing eyes watching silently from the fog, and the Iroquois knew, as long as Onaka walked in the shadows, their forest would remain sacred, their people safe, and the betrayal that had ended a man's life would serve as a lesson for all time. And so the forest stood, eternal and alive, its rivers glinting in the sunset, its hills guarding the secrets of ages past, and the Ghost King of the Iroquois forest remained, forever vigilant, forever watching, and forever a legend that no darkness could erase.